Today we're looking at the challenges and opportunities with regard to data protection, and we're fortunate enough to be joined by a guest. That's Doug Brockett, president of StorageCraft. Thanks for being here.
Hey, my pleasure, Doug. Good to see you.
Good to see you. And you guys are bringing a great story to the table, and I want to get into that story. But before we get down into the details of the StorageCraft story in particular, I'm curious about what I started with, which is effectively, what are the challenges right now facing an enterprise with regard to data protection? Where do you see the vulnerabilities?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've had develop in the last couple of years is just this explosion of unstructured data. Whether you think about the stuff that was generated by VM sprawl, or thinking about all the information that's coming in from Internet of Things, or from imaging applications, or from police video, from body cams, all of this stuff is starting to generate just a deluge of data that's taking a lot of folks that might not previously have thought about their information on the scale of petabytes to having to think in a way that's just completely new to them. And at the same time that this data is exploding, we've got this challenge that we've got compliance requirements like we've never had before. We've got security threats like ransomware hitting us. We've got to be ever vigilant against sort of internal misuse of data or data leakage. All of this stuff is adding complexity on top of complexity on top of orders of magnitude more volume. And I think that's really what's driving a lot of concern among a lot of IT organizations.
Well, and you hear the stories, the general stories about how we're being overrun by data, but really it is these practical, sometimes legislative, or certainly compliance-based applications that have to be dealt with. These requirements that.
I think that's a really big part of it, right? I mean, people are trying to understand, hey, with GDPR or some of the new regulations we're seeing in California spreading to the rest of the United States, that is introducing a whole level of compliance requirements that have pretty stiff financial penalties associated with them. And when you couple that with what's been happening with data breaches, or on the flip side, if you have data corruption and your business is brought down, we've got so much economic value tied up in this data that the need to protect it is bigger than it's ever been before, and yet the scale of the problem is something that we're not well prepared to address.
Well, and so there has obviously been data for a long time in the enterprise, and there are very large companies who have been selling very large amounts of data storage to companies. And now there's this new breed of company coming along. Where do you see the opportunity for you guys to move into that very established market?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's really changing is that we used to have a lot of our data in structured formats, right? And your biggest concern, was how fast your database was performing in a relatively narrow, constrained problem field, right? It was all about my IOPS kind of problem. Now we've got these blossoming fields with all this unstructured data. It's really, really high volume, and it's not structured the way that it used to be structured. We're not seeing traditional database types of accesses to it. We're seeing very different types of applications run against it, and that's leading to different types of metrics, and it's also leading to application sprawl as more and more apps try to get at this data. So what does that mean, right? I think that a lot of larger traditional companies that are focused in storage and data protection have focused on building silos, right? Give me one storage solution for every application that I have, whether it's a primary database, whether it's virtualization, whether it's backup and data recovery, whether it's archive. And what I think a lot of IT organizations are getting smart about is this proliferation of silos doesn't work. It ramps up my CapEx, it ramps up my OpEx. It fundamentally turns one scaling problem into 20 scaling problems. So what gives, I think, a new generation of vendors a lot of opportunity is that we're really breaking down a lot of these silos and we're collapsing the problems. And we're helping people think about data management and data protection in a more holistic way across their organization, and allowing them to introduce an ease of use, a scalability, and a consolidation that's going to save them a lot of CapEx and a lot of OpEx.
So where are you finding traction within an organization, not necessarily a vertical per se, but where do you see yourselves kind of starting to slot in?
StorageCraft has historically been extremely strong with the SMB and mid-market customers, and that continues to be our number one focus. We are, very, very dedicated to making sure that we're solving problems that sort of democratize technologies and take things that used to be the provenance of only the Fortune 500 and let everybody take advantage of that. One of the things we've discovered is that when you do a really, really good job solving problems at the SMB and mid-market levels, it means you've solved the economics really well. It means you've solved ease of use really well. It means you've solved reliability really well. You've got a great value proposition and, frankly, a great business proposition for our channel partners. When you do that, all of a sudden you find Fortune 500, Fortune 1000, Fortune 2000 companies saying, hey, you know what? I've never entertained you as part of my major data center vendor set, but I've got projects, I've got programs, I've got departments in which this thing tends to fit. And what we've been seeing over time is that we're getting picked up by more and more of those organizations with a lot of blue chip companies that are starting to deploy our technologies because they've been proven out and because they just work at an economic level that, frankly, the larger vendors can't touch.
Well, so we're talking about scale and we're talking about protection. And it's interesting you mentioned the SMB space because it seems like not only for data but across a lot of different solutions now, these more nimble, kind of easier to acquire modern solutions are now available to them that really provide them with a level of application capacity that they never had before. And I'm curious, where do you find the biggest threat for those guys right now with regard to data protection, now that they're realizing the amounts of data that they're starting to have to handle?
Yeah, I think one of the current top of mind issues is really ransomware. That's probably one of the areas that has the biggest potential to disrupt businesses of any size today. It's really a shame that a set of bad actors are able to cause so much disruption. But if you think about both the value that we place in the data that we have and the complexity and almost fragility of some of the modern systems where we have so much interdependence between networking, between ourselves and our partners and our other vendors that we work with and our suppliers, that means that any disruption to that data, any corruption to that data has the potential to bring your business down. And so, if I were talking about today, ransomware is a huge threat that people are worried about.
Well, so what steps would you recommend that folks take in that mid-market to really begin to protect themselves against that? Because it really, the ransom part of the ransomware problem is not the problem. It's not necessarily the payment. It's the damage that happens when the ransomware is finally turned back, I guess. Yeah,
I think one of the tragedies that we see is that even though we want to think of ourselves as being prepared and we provide, certainly advocate strong security solutions, 70% of the people that have suffered a ransomware attack actually had fully up-to-date modern security solutions deployed and still got attacked. So what do you do? Well, there's a couple of things that you can look at. First and foremost, at StorageCraft, on our storage appliances, we keep continuous write-once snapshots of everything that's being stored so that there's no chance for the ransomware to actually, encrypt and mutate that previous versions of files. So you can bring back what you may have gotten encrypted with a simple drag and drop operation. And that's fantastic and works for those customers that have deployed our storage appliances. For those of them that don't, then there's two other real things you've got to look at. One is, what are you going to do while you're busy remediating, right? What's your interim step? And for most companies, that means that they need to look at some sort of DR capability. Our solution for that is to provide disaster recovery in the cloud, where our customers can go spin up backup copies of all of their systems in our cloud, fully orchestrated and networked, so they can keep running while they work on the rest of the remediation process. The final step, of course, is you want to be able to bring back your uncorrupted data, from whatever backups you have. And whether that's a granular recovery, pulling files and email messages and other stuff out of a backup, or whether that's a full machine restore onto a new clean machine, that's a step you're going to have to take if you want to make sure that you're for you, the ransomware. So really, it's 3 steps. 1, make sure that you're taking snapshots in a place that's immutable and is going to be protected. Step 2, recognize the fact that it's going to take you a while to recover. Have a disaster recovery site so that you can have business continuity, either in the cloud or another location for your business. And 3, be prepared for the fact that it's going to take you a while to go, figure out what you need to get from backup and either do full machine recoveries or file-by-file recoveries. But for heaven's sake, make sure it's being done into a clean environment so you don't, rinse and repeat the whole ransomware cycle.
So how quickly can a company really kind of go down that path? I mean, what are they looking at if they were to say, all right, good advice, I'm going to start that today? What are they looking at for time frame?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing you need to do is, to be taking a close look at, hey, what is my infrastructure? What's my most critical data? What data is less critical? What are the timeframes and service level objectives I want to have around this? The second thing you need to be doing is to be taking a look at, hey, what's your infrastructure? How much network capacity do you have to get to and from a cloud or from a disaster recovery site? Third thing is, hey, how much data do I have, right? Given my network and compute capacity, how much can I bring back and not bring back? And then finally, hey, what is going to be my OpEx, my operational skill set requirement, and other things to actually implement whatever I need to do here? And that's really where your tool selection, lands, right? You're going to be looking at a solution that you can manage with the skill set and the staff that you have, not just at the time that you need to do your backup and your data protection, but also at the time you need to do recovery, right? You can't forget about the fact that a recovery process is going to require effort on your part to make that happen. And so you want to have a tool that will be as efficient as possible in making it go. And so, actually implementing a DR strategy and a backup strategy, that could be something that's done in days to weeks. When you're attacked by ransomware, your recovery capability, that becomes a question of, hey, what tool have I selected? And is it something that's going to help me orchestrate? And is it going to be something that helps me recover and recover flexibly?
So you've seen a lot of behind the curtain situations with regard to either ransomware attacks or just seeing customers that have come to you and said, hey, we could use a little more robust solution. Where are we right now with regard to sophistication and adoption of those types of data best practices, continuity best practices?
Yeah, I'd have to say that, particularly as in regards to ransomware, we're still pretty immature.
Right.
It is sadly a threat that is growing so fast that we, as an industry, just have not got the right sort of top-down answers for how to solve it. But more importantly, one of the best things that you can do as an IT organization is practice, right? How am I going to test my disaster recovery capability? How am I going to test my business continuity? Am I doing test backups and test restores on a regular basis so that I know when that alarm goes off, how I'm going to respond and how quickly I'm going to be able to get there? And I think if I were going to offer some advice to any organization, it is, don't just think ahead, don't just plan ahead, act and prepare.
Well, that's great advice. And honestly, if you're looking at this video, you probably need help, judging from that state of affairs. So we would certainly encourage you to check out everything that we're writing about at Solutions Review with regard to backup and disaster recovery and all of our other data and analytics content. And certainly head over to StorageCraft and check out what they're offering. It is something that you clearly need to take seriously, and I think you already know that. And so we would encourage you to get proactive and protect yourself. Thanks very much for being here, Doug. It's been a pleasure.
Hey, anytime.